Liam, good morning. Good seeing to you. Hear what our studio guests are saying here, and this story featuring in the Mail about America saying, right, let's now ban Russian oil. But there'll be pain in that for all of us.
There absolutely would, Eamon, if that is what happens. I mean, in the middle of last week, there was a bipartisan bill that started to go through Congress. Over the weekend, what sparked this fear in global oil markets, and oil touched $138 a barrel this morning. That's up from just $70 a barrel back in December. That's the scale of the increase. What sparked these fears is that US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is saying that the US government is now exploring the idea of banning the sale of Russian oil abroad. The Americans can do that given their grip over the global banking and payment system. Russia accounts for about 10 to 15% of the world's oil supply on any given day. And oil prices went up to almost $150 a barrel during that financial panic in 2008. They're now touching $140 a barrel. I wrote over the weekend that we could see £2 a litre for petrol and diesel on the forecourts. It doesn't bring me any pleasure to say that, but in my view, that is now the reality.
That is the reality, and it's one thing saying, use your car less, but if that's your way of getting around, getting into work, visiting aged parents or whatever it is, it's no help. But that's the way it's headed, that's the way it looks, and it all adds to the cost of living crisis.
It does, but I wonder, whether the British public, we've seen unbelievable amounts of money raised since the DEC committee launched their appeal. I think 100 million has reached. We heard about the Daily Mail.
In 100 hours?
In 100 hours. The Daily Mail campaign raising huge sums of money. And I wonder if people need to think in this mindset, we may have to pay more at the forecourt for our fuel in our car, but we don't want to be fueling Putin's war machine, and that's the price that we have to pay.
You've absolutely put your finger on it, Isabel. There is a huge surge of public opinion, as you say, an outpouring of public generosity towards Ukrainian people who are suffering this ghastly, brutal invasion. But on the other hand, the reality is that for a lot of people, getting in their car and van is the way they make their living, the way that they provide for their family. And these sanctions, if they were going to be meaningful, and crikey, are they meaningful? The incredible sanctions that the West is putting on Russia are really quite unprecedented display of determination by the US, the UK and the European Union. The Swiss putting on sanctions, the Japanese putting sanctions on Russia, the Japanese saying that they're going to be part of this ban on Russian oil, and they import an awful lot of Russian oil. Of course, that is incredible, but it is going to impose pain here in the UK. Just to put this in historic contexts, when the Soviets invaded Afghanistan back in the late 70s, we remember that, don't we, Eamon? That was also at a time when oil prices and inflation was already high. And in my view, Putin's waited again until the cost of living crisis was where it is. We've been talking about the cost of living crisis on GBNews for weeks and weeks before this invasion, Liam, because already commodity prices were high.
How much worse, Liam? How much more pain can we take? We've got the president of the World Bank, and he said last week that this war is a complete catastrophe, he says, because it comes at a bad time for the world because inflation was already rising. And, people watch programs like ours, we listen to the radio, we read the newspapers, they're feeling the cost of living crisis, and they're thinking, bloomin' heck, this is going to get worse, much worse.
I think one source for optimism, Eamon, is this. The Chinese also import oil. These super high oil prices, if that's what it comes to, and we're already between $130 and $140 a barrel, the all-time high is almost 150, as I said. That's going to impact the Chinese too, and they're not going to like that either. You're right. This is a war between between Russia and Ukraine. Between them, they're not massive economies in the world. Russia's just about in the top 10 on some definitions. Ukraine's a tiny economy, but given their exports of oil and gas and food and fertilizer and industrial metals and all kinds of things we use in production, it is going to impact inflation, but that inflation is also going to harm the Chinese, and it's going to impact their standard of living. So look, we're right to focus every day, as we do on GB News, on the military aspects, on the humanitarian aspects, on, as Isabel rightly says, the tremendous resolve of British people to help Ukrainian people who are showing untold resolve. But there will be economic pain, yet that economic pain will be shared by the Chinese as well. So perhaps down the line, the Chinese can bring their influence to bear on the Russians in order to try and sue for peace and come to some kind of agreement that can make global financial markets calm down. These are arcane ideas, Eamon and Isabel, but in a crisis, everyone needs to understand economic and financial realities.
Well, look, I know you're going to bring us those financial and economic realities with Liam's show On the Money. You can see it here. He'll be in studio here at GB News at 1 o'clock